So it looks like a couple people are coming in. All right, I've gotten everybody accepted. So I think we can start going. That's great. Over 40 people have joined. That's awesome. Hi, everybody. My name is Steven Snyder. I am a student at Harvard University studying sustainability and sustainable finance. I'm really happy that you all are here on this call. It's been really cool to organize along with Monica and Gideon at Good Capital. I'm just going to give a quick housekeeping, letting you guys know that this is being recorded, that I do have the power to kick people out, so please be respectful. And if any Zoom bombing happens, I'll be monitoring just in case anyone is being inappropriate. With that said, thank you again for joining. I'm really happy to be here and to have a great panel of really amazing leaders in the space about to share with you how you personally can get involved into sustainable finance. It's not just a trend, it's something that's here to stay. And I personally believe that it's going to be a way that we're going to be able to make the world a better place, especially in times right now with what's going on. So as we start, I'm going to launch a poll so that we can see where you're coming from and what your professional background is. Please select the region that closest aligns to where you are right now in the world so we can get a sense of our audience. And also tell us, you know, what it is you generally do for work so we can get an idea of, yeah, your background and better tailor this conversation to it. So I see that majority of people are calling in from the East Coast, as to be expected. I'm going to give it a few more seconds for everybody to give feedback. We're at right now 70% have voted, and we're still having more people coming in. All right, 50 people in the meeting. That is awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining. Other housekeeping is that we will be doing Q&A virtually. We would like you to submit your questions through a program called Slido. It allows you to vote for the questions that you want to be answered. And you can put your name if you would like to do that. And if you have a question that's direct to a speaker, please indicate who you would like that to be asked. We'll be doing some questions in between speakers, but the majority of the Q&A will be at the end, and that will be open to all of the speakers. So I'm going to end the poll right now and share the results with everyone so that they can see. So 60% of everyone is from the East Coast. We have a few people calling in from Central USA, one person calling in from the West Coast, thank you. And we have 6 people calling in from Western Europe, one person from Asia, hello to you, and 4 people from Central and South America. When it comes to your background, 10 people are in the financial sector, some other people in the private sector, and then we also have a bunch of students as well. So welcome to you all. I hope you guys were able to see the results. I'm going to share one more poll, and this one's the really good one. We want to know what your knowledge is about this session's topic. You know, have you heard about it before? Are you a novice? Are you here to learn more? Or what do you consider yourself an expert? Give us a sense so we can tailor our descriptions and our language to the audience. So very interesting. I'm seeing about 20 people, or 70% of people saying that they're a novice. So welcome, thank you for being so honest with us. This will be an opportunity for you to learn for sure. But we do have a few people who are working in the space and are here to learn more. So I'm gonna end the poll and share it with everyone so they can see. And at this point, I'm gonna welcome our moderator and co-host for the event. Monica is someone that I met just recently through another event, and I'm very happy to have partnered with her. Good Capital is our sponsor for this event, and Monica's gonna do a great job of leading the conversation. She started out at Citigroup, working in various different roles from sales and operations and private equity. But what's interesting about her is that she kind of made a transition and went into education, being a preschool teacher and doing ed tech startups before she started Good Capital. And I really like how she phrased it in our speaker bios, that She's here to promote socially responsible investing and empower women financially. So Monica, please take it away. Thank you so much.
Thanks for that introduction, Stephen. I feel so honored. Amazing. Thank you to everyone for being here today. Happy Friday. We are so excited to get everyone together. So thank you to our speakers, Diane Delava, Steve Wourgiotis, Emma Jenkins, and Eric Glass. We're so excited to hear all you have to share with us today. Also wanted to shout out the MyMoneyMyPlanet campaign for bringing us all together. And Diane's going to talk more about it, but just a little preface, the My Money, My Planet campaign is here to change the way our money impacts our planet. So excited to hear more from Diane about that. As Stephen mentioned, just wanted to give a brief intro of who I am and what Good Capital is. I'm Monica Meng. I'm the co-founder of Good Capital. We are a sustainable wealth management firm, and we're on a mission to help purpose-driven individuals and families grow their wealth, feel confident about their finances, and align their money with their values. So often when people think about social impact or sustainability, they forget to take into account their own financial impact and how their money is saying or doing things that they probably aren't aware of. And that's what we're here to change, which segues perfectly into what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to hear from 4 practitioners in the field. Yeah, really excited about that. Just to give you a quick background on what's happening with sustainable investing. It's really taken off in the past few years, though it's been around for much longer. There's been a change in consumer preference as corporate responsibility has been pushed to the forefront, I think. And we all want to support good companies that care about more than just their profits. So I think that right now is also a really interesting inflection point for ESG and impact investing strategies, because it's becoming more mainstream and we can see how it's been doing better than traditional funds, partly because of coronavirus, partly because of just the trend growing and millennials really backing this trend. So that's really been cool to see. I think the recent momentum of the Black Lives Matter movement has also propelled everything forward. It's been encouraging shareholders to demand more transparency from companies around their diversity and inclusion. So all these great things are happening. Well, Black Lives Matter movement, I guess, it's a good thing happening right now, pushing everything forward, increasing social equity. Yeah, so it's an amazing time to be getting into this topic. So excited that everyone's here to talk about this. So let's get down to it. We're gonna start with each of the panelists. Gideon, if you could just put the list. And then if you have questions, please put them into the Slido, the link that Steven Snyder added to the chat. We'll take questions after each speaker if you have a question. If not, we'll wait till the end and do a general Q&A with all the speakers, and then we'll go into breakout sessions, and then we'll wrap things up. So Diane, do you want to get us started?
Yes, for sure. Let me share my screen. So now you should be able to see my screen. So I'm Diane. I'm very excited to be with you today, and I'm tuning in from Belgium, Europe, where this My Money, My Planet initiative all started. And I prepared a few slides. I won't be long. And I just wanted to give you a bit of background on myself. So I'm Diane, I'm the co-founder of mattrvest, and we're using technology to really spread the word on sustainable finance, because as Monica said, it's not something that people think about. And so we are there to change that. And we do a lot of webinars, a lot of keynotes, presentation all over to show people the impact of sustainable finance. And I think this image really shows what I want to express throughout this presentation, is that sustainable finance is not talked about. And so it's not a problem that we can fix. And it's only when people will see the issue with finance and with the link with sustainability that it will be a problem that we will tackle. And so that's also why My Money, My Planet got started. So when we talk about sustainability, a lot of us think about the meats that we eat, the flights that we take, the transportation that we use. However, a lot of us do not think about the money and the role that our money plays in this equation. And I just wanted to start with an example, because I think that's the most compelling thing that we can relate to. So last year in 2019, there were the Amazon forest fires. And I think a lot of us talked about it on social media and how devastating it was to have the earth lungs burning. However, what we forget is that those fires were devastating because they were human-led, and they were caused by deforestation of huge companies that were involved within deforestation in the forest. And behind those companies were huge financial groups which invested in those companies, and a lot of huge banks. I have the names of the European banks like Deutsche Bank, BNP, but BlackRock and Vanguard were also involved within this fire. So while you were on your computer on social media, whatever that social media is, saying, oh my God, the earth lungs are burning, what can I do? Or even donating to a cause, your money might have had a role to play in this. And so there's a dissonance that you can see. And so it all adds up. It all adds up in a way that you might be on your Friday, within the Friday for Future strikes, fighting for climate change, but if your money is doing the opposite, what's the point? And that's for a lot of things. Like if you're vegan, if your money is doing the opposite, what's the point? And the My Money, My Planet really wanted to highlight that. If you want to be vegan, you need to have your money also playing the same role as that. So it was this dissonance that we wanted to really highlight. On top of that, one of the Swedish banks, which is called Nordea, did a research, and they found out that saving sustainably could have up to 27 times more impact than your sustainable consumption. So if you look at everything you do on a consumption side, which takes a lot of efforts from you on a daily basis, and I can think of some of my friends who even go to work and say that a bit of sweat is not worth worrying about because it's sustainable. You could just make your money go for the right things, and that would bring already so much more impact. It's just that the awareness level is very low. And yes, change is possible. So I'm talking to you about this, but I might say that changing money is a way to go. It might not be possible, but it is. And a pension fund in the US got a phone call from 10 of the customers asking what their funds were invested in. And that pension fund actually contacted a sustainable expert to make their pension fund more sustainable. So that is something that will happen if a lot of people have an increased awareness on the problem of sustainable finance and demand more sustainability for their money. So that's why we started My Money, My Planet. And that's me, that's my bank. Honestly, today I don't have a fully sustainable option in Belgium that does current and savings accounts. So I'm in a normal bank. And what I did was on an individual basis, I got aware of sustainable finance and I sent my bank a letter. I sent my bank a letter, that letter never got an answer. So I was like, okay, what should I do? I tagged my bank on social media. I didn't get an answer. And then I went on a community portal of the bank, and there I got an answer because honestly, my bank had a bit of pressure to answer all of the customers' requests. So they did answer my request on where is my money going? Because yes, I think a lot of people do not realize that when you put all your money on your savings account, in whichever bank it is, that money is used for something. And so I asked my bank, is my money going into renewable projects in Denmark, or is it going into companies that are responsible for the Amazon forest fire? What my bank told me was that they were recycling paper, which was not satisfying. And so that's why I decided to really spread the awareness on the fact that a lot of people do not wonder how banks work. And a lot of people do not realize that their money might be used for something that they're not agreeing with. And so this campaign was launched mid of April. And so I just wanted to show you the progress so far. So what we did is we launched a website, which is called MyMoneyMyPlanet. We did a lot of webinars to increase awareness on the issue, but we also enabled people to do two things. One is share on social media a photo with their bank card, of course, hiding the detail, and tagging their bank to ask where their funds were going. And two, on the website of MyMoneyMyPlanet.com, there's a manifesto. You can just sign the manifesto and we'll directly send a letter to your bank. Numbers of letters that we sent and the social media posts that a lot of people did, here's the progress. So 184 people signed the manifesto and 92 people tagged their bank on social media. The result of that was that we got a 60% reply rate from banks, which is high. It's actually higher in Europe than in the US. Some responses were not at all satisfying, but at least we got an answer. And some banks did not answer at all. As a result of a lot of these letters that we sent, we got two phones, one from BNP and one from ING, and they actually want to meet us to really discuss what we want to express with My Money, My Planet. Yeah, that's really good news. So we are meeting them one in 1 week and one in 2 weeks' time. And that's where we want to really start a dialogue and really encourage them as well to start a dialogue with their customers on sustainable finance. And within all these answers that we got, we are also starting a ranking because we don't want this My Money, My Planet to be an individual effort. We want the results to be available to everyone. So we are ranking all the bank's responses based on these criteria in order for it to be totally transparent to everyone who signed, but also people who want to sign and who are yet to see the sustainability of their bank. One thing that we realized so far within some of the answers that we got is that the more sustainable the bank is, the shorter response they will send us. So this is one of the most sustainable banks in Belgium. And as you can see, the answer is very straightforward because they have nothing to hide. And when you have a bank which is not transparent at all, they will list, I don't know how many CSR awards that they got. They will also tell you that they recycle paper. So it's very crazy to see how we're only asking for transparency and how that bank will not even give you transparency because it's one way to say we're not sustainable. You can make your choice and go to another bank, sorry. But it's also one thing to say, oh, you know, listen, we're sustainable, because that's honestly just, that's not correct. That's not right. So yeah, here is a lot of the people who tagged on social media and who asked their bank. So we had a lot of people doing that, and that was thanks to Stephen a lot. So thank you so much, and you can actually see him on the slides. We even got an article in a Georgian newspaper, which was thanks to one of our very engaged person on the campaign as well. So that was very exciting to see because it's not even a language that I can read, yet we were talking about My Money, My Planet. And so yes, I just wanted to finish with this. So you can also take part in the campaign. You can post a selfie on social media, whatever social media you would like, and with the hashtag MyMoneyMyPlanet. Just please tag your bank, because we had, I think so far, only one bank who replied on social media on what they were doing with the funds. The rest did not even reply, but the more people post, the more people see, and the more people ask themselves the question. And then you can go also on the MyMoneyMyPlanet website and sign a manifesto, and we'll send a letter to your bank on your behalf with you in copy, of course. If you want to take part on an individual level and just send a letter to your bank yourself, we'll always be grateful if you could send us the answer you received, so that we can aggregate the data and also put that bank within the ranking that we're doing. So yeah, just share it around you as well. And I just wanted to finish on a quote, because I really like this quote, and I think that really finance rules the world. And I can feel that also with COVID, as a lot of people worry about the stock markets more than the health of some citizens. So, and I really want to have finance change for the better, and I think we can do that together. So yeah, I can share my contact details in the chat, but I'm done for now. So thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, Diane. Great to hear your story, and also everyone sign the manifesto. I put the link in there. Awesome. We have Steve up next to talk to us about ESG and tell us more about what it is and why it makes sense.
Great. Hi, everybody. This is Steve Wourgiotis. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. But first, I just want to say thank you to Diane. Right. It's one thing to understand that there's a problem out there. It's another to go out and do something. But it's even better when you can engage others. So thank you, Diane, for your work. And what she's pointing to is a really important issue, that finance does rule our world. And I'm just dropping a resource into the chat if you want to take a look at something that will blow your mind about the role that fossil fuels get in terms of support from the financial sector. Really fascinating stuff. And if you look at how renewable energy is supported versus fossil fuels, it's just another example. But today, what we're going to talk about together is, and I'm assuming that you can all see my screen now. We're going to be looking at ESG and thinking about the role that that plays in a sustainable portfolio. And so my name is Steve Wourgiotis. I live just a little bit north of Boston in Durham, New Hampshire. And my background has primarily been in consulting, leadership consulting, organizational consulting, management consulting. And I actually started out working in investment banks. And over the years, I have been winding my way through MBA land and helping rich companies get richer, very successfully, I might add. But that's contributed to the problem that Diane is pointing out. And so now I'm atoning for my sins in the second half of my career. Like Stephen Snyder, I'm getting a master's at Harvard in sustainability. And what I'd love to share with you is some of the gleanings that I've had about ESG and how it matters that I've been sharing in a course I'm teaching at the University of New Hampshire in hedge fund analytics. So here what we're going to talk about is, what is ESG? And the good news is you already know what ESG is: environmental, social, and governance issues. They come in all different flavors. And I've got three very well-known examples up here. Coca-Cola is a frequent winner of environmental disasters in the minds of some. Last year, they were found for the second year in a row to be the #1 plastic polluter on the planet. And there's a lot of great journalist activity that's showing how Coca-Cola is taking great efforts to undermine recycling. You could also look at water footprint, et cetera. That's an example of environmental issues. Social issues, well, we're certainly seeing with Black Lives Matter, there's a lot going on that goes well outside the purview of any single organization. It's an enormous issue. Here I've got one for Facebook. I don't know if you remember, but Facebook has had a number of issues around collecting and sharing user information without consent. There were the Cambridge Analytica. These led to Facebook being delisted from the S&P 500 socially responsible companies. So this is an example of a social impact of a company. And finally, governance. This is essentially kind of a corruption measure or an inequity measure. And we all know what happened with Volkswagen, sort of suppressing issues around their performance, and ultimately Dieselgate, and it all stemmed from company governance issues. So why does ESG matter, and why would we be talking about ESG? Well, it turns out that ESG is becoming increasingly important in how investors evaluate where they should be putting their money. So like Diane was saying, where is my money going? Is it going to burn the lungs of the planet, or is it doing something a little more positive? Now, you can't do much, or I think Diane said, you can't fix a problem that you can't see. ESG data and the reporting of that data is a really positive step. It's on the rise. And what we're looking at on the right is a graph of the Fortune 500, the S&P 500, the biggest 500 highest value companies. And the height of the blue bar shows the share of those companies that are doing some kind of sustainability reporting. What do we gather from that? Well, good news. As of 2018, 86% are now sharing some or most of their story about the impact they're having. A little bit of bad news right underneath this, the next 500, the graph is reversed. Only about 14% are actually doing the CSR reporting or ESG reporting. It's pretty expensive to do, takes a lot of work. The pressure for them to do this comes from people like Diane. It comes from being in the news, but a lot of it also comes from investors and investment managers. When companies start fielding calls saying, hey, what are you doing about your water footprint? Hey, do you realize that you're funding the destruction of our planet? Those companies are starting to pay attention, and now they feel like they need to justify what they're doing and why. Now, different investors care about ESG for different reasons. So this is summarizing some information from a 2018 study where they were looking at how investors use ESG data. And in this case, we've roughly categorized investors into only two groups. The group on the left are the people who say, you know what? ESG is a financially material problem. I don't want to be betting my money on an organization that's going to be at risk because of an environmental, social, or governance risk factor. For those people, they want to use ESG information because they want to get involved in the management of the company. They want to incorporate that deeply in how they project the value of what that company is worth. And they want to make sure that their portfolio is representing the risks, returns that come with being positive ESG. On the other hand, there are investors who are like, you know what? I don't frankly care if it's material or not. I am not putting my money in a bad place. And so for those people, they're primarily using what's called screening. What that comes down to is saying, all right, let me look at all the places we could park our money. Out of those, I'm just going to not even look at the ones that don't have a great ESG record. So if I don't feel like they're being transparent and having a positive impact, they're just off my list. That's called negative screening. Or you might look at the top performers of ESG and say, I don't care what their results are as much, but I'm positively screening them into the universe of options for my investments. So investors are really starting to pay attention to this. And I know that one of the questions we'll get to that was on the Slido is around BlackRock and Larry Fink. And, you know, is this actually going to make a difference? Well, we can talk about that in more detail, but I'm taking it as a really positive step. I see my co-panelist Eric is giving it thumbs down. But I think that I'm hoping to see a really positive step as companies start having to go through some more hurdles before they get easy, cheap access to capital. And we can talk about that later. There are two things I'd like you to know about ESG mutual funds. And for those of you who don't know what a fund is, it's basically money that is pooled by an investment manager. And they might put, 2% in that company and 4.3% in that other company. And they end up creating a portfolio to deliver some purpose. Now, anyone can call themselves a sustainable fund. And I'd like to point out that they're really, according to Morningstar anyway, a really reputable evaluator of investment options. They created a taxonomy of 4 different types of sustainable funds, and I've got them here for you on the screen. It might be a little small to read. You don't need to see all the details. On the left-hand side are ESG consideration funds. That's where if I'm a portfolio manager and I have an ESG consideration, it says, I will consider ESG factors when I make my choices. What does that actually mean about being committed to sustainability? Absolutely nothing. They're required to think about it but they're not required to do anything. The other three types are sustainable funds that have more guardrails about what the funds get used for. So an ESG focused fund is a very broad fund that's going to invest in ESG as a whole. So they can draw from a universe of environmental, social, governance, performance, and it's a very broad capability. Or they could narrow in on a particular impact. I could be a low carbon footprint sustainable fund, for example. And then the fourth kind are the sustainable sector, where you're really investing in green. Think wind farms and solar. Think energy efficiency, although not all of us maybe look at energy efficiency as sustainably as others might. But these are four ways to think about those funds. And a lot of people have a misconception that in order to invest in sustainable vehicles, in sustainable options, you need to be giving up in terms of return. And what Morningstar has found is that in recent years, that is simply not the case. So you're welcome to go take a look at what Morningstar said. You don't need to look at all the details here. What I want to just show you, if you look at the, we don't have time to go through it all. An average company out there, we're going to see 1/4 of all the average companies fitting into the top quartile of performance, a quarter fitting into the second quartile, into the third, into the fourth. And if we look at the sustainable funds, they are really outperforming. For example, in 2019, we see a total of 65% of them in the top half, 35% are in the top quarter for generating returns. And of course, what do you have to take on to get return? You have to take on risk. So they're beating the large cap. They're doing great on the return side. What does it look like from a risk factor? And what Morningstar has found is that ESG risk sensitive funds actually have lower overall risk. And so in the top right graph, the sustainability rating, when you got a 5-star or a 4-star from Morningstar, they are really doing super well, have very low risk, and are perceived to be a much safer bet than the average portfolio of funds. And lastly, investors care about this greatly. Okay, great, Steve, but does sustainability vary with other factors in the marketplace? Because if it does, that's not going to help me. And as it turns out, ESG does vary differently from the other factors, which makes it a really useful tool for investors to include in their portfolio. And we're seeing, at least in the mutual funds, this outperformance on risk while taking on outperformance for the risk especially. So I realized that was an unbelievably fast blast through what is ESG and what are the funds. But I hope that what you'll take away from it is that we're seeing positive moves towards transparency. Investors care about it, and it's an increasingly great option. With that, back to you, Monica.
Thanks, Steve. That was a great overview. I feel like I even learned new things, and I'm in this space, so that was really nice. Just quickly glancing at the questions. I think we'll wait till the end for now. All right, let's keep moving on then. Let's go to Emma Jenkins.
Right. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Monica and Stephen, for inviting me. Thanks, everyone, for being here. I hope you all are well and safe. I just want to start by recognizing that that we're occupying airtime that could be dedicated to Black Lives Matter related advocacy and actions entirely. And especially here in the United States, we often fail to acknowledge the social aspects of sustainability. And how to truly embody the spirit of sustainable finance, we must be investing in anti-racism along with environmental impacts as well. And so I was invited here to talk about reasons to invest sustainably. So that's the most important one that I want to lead with. But I didn't know about sustainable investing until I started at the Bard MBA. I'm in Bard College's MBA program, and they offer an MBA in sustainability. And all of our core business curriculum has sustainability concepts interwoven throughout. And so that's really where I learned about how the future of business has an integrated bottom line. And what we mean by that is that the bottom line of the business, the goal of the business, is not just to increase revenues and increase profits, but it's also to achieve goals and positive impacts on the environment and on the people in our communities. And at the Bard MBA, we really embrace that, that thesis. We learn about how businesses with a more holistic strategy are often also more successful businesses. If they are looking at their staff, if they are looking at their impacts, and if they are disclosing that information, just what Stephen was saying before, then they will be more attractive companies to investors because they've been proven to perform better. So through the Bard MBA, I was able to get a job at CDP. And if you don't know about CDP, they are probably the most important ESG data providers out there, very important players in this space. And as I was listening to Stephen's presentation, I was really relieved because he gave such a good background of how this system works. And so you are well positioned to understand what CDP does. CDP is a nonprofit that through their disclosure methodology, they collect environmental data from companies. So every year, companies disclose their carbon footprint, they disclose their impact on deforestation and water through CDP's platform. And then CDP takes that data and shares it with investors who are looking for that information to be able to make their decisions about sustainable investments. And often conventional investments, they want to know that companies are performing well with their environmental impacts. And the role that I took at CDP is I helped the companies that I worked with, I helped them understand where their gaps were between their disclosure and best practice, because CDP has a rating and ranking system within it, so that I could really help companies start to build the business case internally for sustainability. And oftentimes that was, yes, to achieve better on their CDP score so that they would be seen as a more sustainable investment for the investors looking at that. But also, first and foremost, they wanted to outperform their peers. They wanted to be the most sustainable company in the consumer goods sector. They wanted to be the most sustainable company in their small regional bank sector. So really that competitive advantage is aligned to how businesses are performing better if they perform better on their environmental impact. And so that theory of change has really motivated public companies to disclose this information and also follow up with it, and every year continually improve their impact and show that they're taking a rigorous leadership approach. But along with that, there are a number of businesses that are wishing to mitigate the risks of climate change in their supply chains. So not only does CDP provide this data to their investors, but they also provide this data to companies that join CDP as part of their supply chain program. So they're collecting that information because they don't want to be purchasing from companies that are not performing well on sustainability. And oftentimes, first and foremost, the investors and these corporations are coming to us because they want to eliminate risks from their portfolios. They want to eliminate headline risk. They want to eliminate the physical risks of climate change. And so from CDP, I made my way into the wealth management space. I currently work for JSA, Sustainable Wealth Management. We're in the greater New York City, Hudson Valley area. And our clients come to us because they want to invest sustainably, as I'm sure many of you do. They want their money to be put to be aligned with, you know, the MyMoneyMyPlanet initiatives. They want their investments to be aligned with the values that they put out in the world in every other aspect of their life. And so we really take a holistic approach to supporting our clients, not just with their investments, but looking at their whole lifestyle, and we help them make decisions about how to have a more sustainable lifestyle as well. And though many of our clients come to us for that reason, we also have clients who come to us just because they want someone to help them responsibly manage their assets. And really that ESG look is what is adding an extra level of risk management that conventional advisors are not applying to their portfolios. And I think Monica mentioned at the beginning that lately in the economic downturn, ESG funds have shown to have less underside capture than the rest of the market. And so that's really attributed to what a rigorous process this goes through. There are a lot of misconceptions about ESG funds not achieving the same returns as conventional funds, but though that's not the case, and I could get into that, we are working with clients who want to achieve their goals. They don't want to beat the market. They don't want to, you know, chase alpha. They are looking to achieve their financial goals. And to do that, it's really important to look at the non-financial consequences of your investments, because it will relate to the returns that you get as well. So I'm going to wrap up my comments there, but I really look forward to having more of a conversation, Q&A session. So back to you, Monica.
Thanks, Emma. It's great hearing about your experiences and the work that you're doing. We love partnering with you guys. So this is great. Thank you. All right, last up, we have Eric Glass, who is a portfolio manager at AllianceBernstein, talking about his passionate work. Really excited for this.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Stephen, for the platform, and Gideon for the platform and the opportunity to proselytize. So I'm a portfolio manager and impact investor at AllianceBernstein. You probably have never heard of us. There's no reason why you should have heard of us. We are a sort of global asset manager across all asset classes, fixed income, bonds, equity, alternatives, what have you. So we manage about $600 billion of assets globally. I do not. I am a gnat on the ass of an elephant, a voracious gnat, but nonetheless a gnat. Anyway, the vast majority of those assets are not managed sustainably. Okay, so just be very clear about that, just to make a distinction. I am a portfolio manager on our fixed income side, so I deal with bonds, and specifically within the public markets, and specifically within municipalities. So what we've all discussed so far has really been around focused on companies, and what I do is focus on municipalities. And let me just say that I've been with AllianceBernstein for 20 years, for better or for worse, for 20 years, in distinct aspects of. I've played a role in each distinct aspect of asset management. I was on the analytic research side, went to a trading function, and now I'm on a portfolio management function. And so before I did this, my first love, what I should be doing probably to this day, is I helped run a homeless shelter in New Jersey for numerous years, and that was my first love. I really just, it was where I saw myself at that point in time in terms of my interests in public policy, grassroots, empowerment, whatnot. I got some really bad advice from mentors who I love to this day, but I got some bad advice. So I sold my soul to the devil, and I went to asset management. capital markets. And, you know, the moment that I left the nonprofit world, I was trying to always kind of see how I could always inch my way back into that work. And then I was taking a class in 2010 around social entrepreneurship, and I came across this idea of impact investing. And so just generally speaking, it's looking at returns, not only, you know, making investments and looking at returns not only from a financial perspective, but from an environmental and social perspective as well. And it was kind of at that point in time, I found my God. I knew exactly what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I wasn't just going to be a fireman. I was going to be something else. And so, you know, I tried desperately to get into that world and to move into that world, but didn't really have a lot of opportunities to do that. It was pretty at a nascent stage. Certainly didn't really have a lot of momentum or bottoms up demand for that product. So as opposed to you know, sort of beating them, I joined them, and I just started our own fund. Back in 2015, a client that we had, and this is a broad brushstroke, but not a lot of things happen in corporate America until you lose money. It's once you lose money, then all of a sudden we can think creatively about things. And so back in 2015, we lost a client. A meaningful private client legacy relationship that they supposedly wanted to do impact investing. We didn't have it on our platform. And so they left. And since I had brought up this idea back in 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, and told to go pound sand on each of those occasions, suddenly I was the new kid in town and people wanted to listen to me. So that's kind of the way it worked. I was lucky to be in that position. We had, you know, we started back in 2016, we started our impact portfolio with $0 and a dream. And now we're approaching 900 million. And I would be very disappointed if we don't exceed $1 billion of assets by the end of the year. So, you know, what you take from that, I have no idea, other than, like, you know, sometimes the sun shines on a dog's ass every once in a while, and the sun shined on my ass. So that's it. Anyway, one thing I'd like to clarify is just in terms of impact. Like, what is impact? I think it's a term that's been thrown around an awful lot, and I think it's been bastardized. And so it's very important when I talk to potential investors or, you know, just groups of people interested in sustainable investing, it's really, really important to define what I do. And I think there's a taxonomy to it, and it's very important that you adhere to that taxonomy. So when I talk about impact investing, for me, we make investments in historically marginalized communities, historically under-resourced communities. That's all we do. That's our reason for being. Every one of our investments has a specific intention. So when we talk about education, right, we don't invest, you know, our intention is, you know, we want to reduce an achievement gap or an opportunity gap that exists between a district that has and a district that has not, right? You know, there are many districts throughout the country where the capital stock, meaning the schools, are literally 60, 70, 80 years old. And it's not because they're architectural marvels or historical landmarks, it's because they're old. And so what does that tell a student? What does that tell a teacher about, you know, their worth? Effectively, basically telling me you don't matter. And so when we talk about an opportunity gap, you know, we can talk about achievement, we can talk about outcomes all we want, but from my perspective, if we're going to ask everyone to run a race, we should at least have them start from the same place, right? And so our goal is to provide state-of-the-art facilities to all kids throughout the country that don't have access to those state-of-the-art facilities, right? And then we can, you know, then let's start the race. Let's see where it goes. When we invest in healthcare, ultimately our goal is to reduce the life expectancy gap that exists between those people that live in wealthy zip codes and those that live in poor zip codes. And we've given some thought on how to reduce the life expectancy of those people who live in wealthy zip codes, but the conclusion that we've drawn is, generally speaking, that's illegal and considered murder. So we've decided to go and focus on the people who have the communities that have lower life expectancy. And what we're trying to do is to make, that was a joke, people. I'm not serious about that. I've never thought about that. Never. Anyway, so, you know, you'd be very surprised. So Stephen Snyder's in Boston, right? And so there are two communities up in Boston that are literally 2 miles apart. There's Back Bay, Beacon Hill, and there's Roxbury. Back Bay, Beacon Hill is a wealthy community. Roxbury is a poor community. The average life expectancy of someone who lives in Back Bay, Beacon Hill is 90. And for someone in Roxbury, it's 60. There's a 30-year death gap between people who live in communities that are literally 2 miles apart. As an impact investor, that's repugnant and repulsive. So how do we change that? And our hypothesis is by investing in safety net hospitals that are not only providing a high quality product within the confines of the four walls, but are actually going into the community itself to make that community healthier by working on things called the social determinants of health. How do you stay healthy if you don't have housing? How do you stay healthy if you don't have access to nutritious food or childcare or mass transportation to get from appointment to appointment? So these are the things that hospitals are now investing in to raise the quality of life of their communities and hopefully raise the quality of life of the communities, raise the life expectancy of those communities, right? So take a step back. We invest in historically marginalized communities, historically under-resourced communities. Every investment we make has a specific intention, and then we track that intention with key performance indicators or metrics that are idiosyncratic to the sector that we're investing in. So what we're looking at in the healthcare space is very different than what we're looking at in terms of clean water and sanitation, or mass transportation, or workforce development, or public utilities, basically trying to promote a transition from from fossil fuels to renewables, et cetera, right? And so again, we try to evaluate our impact over time through these metrics that we are engaging with investees on sort of partnering with them on this transparency, on this disclosure. And so we're making direct investments in community. One example of an investment that we've made, real quick, which I think is something that I'm really personally proud of. Here on the East Coast, outside of New York, there's a community in Newark, New Jersey, which is a pretty poor community, and historically, there were riots in 1967, and there are major portions of that city that. Civil unrest, major portion of the city that never recovered. Back in towards the end of 2019, well, I should say 2018, 2019, the city was dealing with a really bad lead issue for the water. So in other words, there are major mains that run through a street, and then in order to get from the water from a main into the house, there's a service line that goes from the house to the main. And in many cases, and this is across the country, in many older neighborhoods, and disproportionately people of color in poor neighborhoods, those service lines are made of lead. And so for water that's not perfectly treated with corrosion control, it will eat out at that service line. That lead service line will leach into the water and ultimately be consumed by the people who live in the home. And what we do know is that lead is a neurotoxin, one of the most dangerous neurotoxins. That, according to the American Pediatric Association, there is no acceptable level of lead in water. Lead has been known to steal IQ points. It's been known to kill people. And again, this disproportionately impacts people of color and the poor. And so what we did is we made a direct investment with the use of proceeds of our investment. We're going to replace the 18,000 identified lead service lines within the city of Newark. And we're happy to report that to date, in terms of impact, over 11,000 of those lines have been replaced. And so for us, that's the beginning of the end to lead in the water in Newark, right? So these are the type of investments that we could conceivably make. In our world, it's kind of the municipal world is a special world where we get to sort of pick and choose. Because it's a use of proceeds driven model, we get to pick and choose the projects that we want to participate in. And so as opposed to building some, administrative building in Los Angeles or Atlanta, we can actually invest in homelessness, wraparound services for the homeless and shelter and low-income housing, right? That's something that we can pick and choose, and we can decide we're going to offensively look at this situation. We want to invest here as opposed to here, right? And so that's a meaningful difference relative to other asset classes. Don't want to belabor the point or take up too much time, but one of the other things that we're really, really intent on, and it's incumbent with our investment, is activism. And so it's very odd to think about fixed income as being activists because we don't own anything. With a company, you can own shares. If you own enough of it, you can place people on the board. You can manipulate management to do what you want to do, your bidding, what have you. But what we've done is tried to take a different approach, which is with our sometimes to change the game, you got to get into the game. And so with our investments, how can we use those investments and use the levers of impact investing to expedite the environmental and social change that we want to see, right? And so we have campaigns going on right now in the state of New Jersey on how to decarcerate. We're using our impact funds to create collaborations and partnerships with activists, other investors, foundations, think tanks, to decarcerate juvenile justice. Ultimately, our goal is to decarcerate juvenile justice in the state of New Jersey and then replicate that throughout the country. We have a campaign around lead service lines. And so, we've done this, we've made this investment in Newark, New Jersey. Now, how do we partner with environmental groups, foundations, et cetera, to replicate that in Chicago, in Cleveland, in Pittsburgh, in Philadelphia, in Boston, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so, and so when we talk about, and Stephen made a point about, there was a question about Larry Fink. And so my response to Larry Fink is really like, yeah, you can say whatever you want and it's all bullshit. To be honest with you, it is all bullshit. Like, we're getting rid of lead service lines. That's impact. I don't give a crap what Larry Fink says he's doing. Impact investing, sustainable investing is a way to have a meaningful influence on community and to reduce disparities that have historically existed. And now you know what and by the way, now you know what happens when you have these disparities, right? COVID, we've been doing this for 4 or 5 years, and all of a sudden people are opening up, awakening to this idea that there are disparities in health outcomes for people of color versus white people. And COVID has exposed that. Well, we knew that all along. And those communities, by the way, knew that all along. COVID has just exacerbated those disparities. And then, obviously when we talk about criminal justice and we talk about social justice, that's a cornerstone of what we're trying to accomplish through our investments. And how do we tear down the carceral state? And, there's a whole bunch of talk about defunding police. I really prefer to use the term reallocating, because let's take money away from the carceral state and let's put it into early education. Let's put it into primary, secondary education. Let's put it into mental health. Let's put it, let's put it into continuums of care for kids and young adults and workforce development. That's how you have a true impact on social justice, from my humble opinion. And so, those are the things that we're intimately involved in, and wanting to, sort of spread the news about, and sort of create a campaign around so other people can sort of join us.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. Such colorful visuals you use. Amazing. It's always amazing to hear about just the passion that you have and the work that you're doing and the actual impact, which is so important, and definitely not talked about enough, I feel like, with sustainable and impact investing, funnily enough. Amazing. Thank you so much to all of our speakers. It's so interesting to hear about everyone's different points of view and coming at this from different angles. We need all of it. All right, so I've looked on the Slido. There are so many awesome questions. So thank you to everyone for submitting your questions. I wanted to start going back to Diane. We have a couple great questions around influence and driving impact. So somebody asked, I'm interested to learn who, maybe at what seniority level, and which departments are the individuals that you're meeting with at ING and BNP? Do they have influence?
Yeah, that's actually a good question, because when they called me, I was wondering who was going to call me. So there, we'll be talking to the head of sustainability in both of the banks. In BNP, that's I know it's the head of sustainability. In ING, I know it's the head of sustainability and an expert on transparency. And what we are doing is also bringing in one of the person who signed the manifesto to have a real customer there, so that he or she can also express what he or she wants to see in the transparency, so that it's not only us, but someone who's really involved. So yeah, so I would say it's not up to the CEO, but I think it's already high enough to have a potential impact.
Cool. And then also follow up, do you publish a list of the banks that you've checked out and what their scores are?
So we are going to do that. We are going to start with Europe because we have more and more signatures in Europe, so enough data to publish a ranking. However, when it comes to the US, we don't have a lot of signatures. So please do share around so that we have more data. We, however, know a lot of NGOs, and we partner with a lot of NGOs, especially in Europe, to understand how sustainable those banks are. And I think that's one of the rankings I showed in my slides. So we also understand how transparent they are, because if they show that they're sustainable in the email, but those rankings show them as not sustainable, we understand that transparency is not there. We checked for bank rankings in the US. However, that until date has not been found from a neutral perspective. There's a lot of for-profit rankings, and I would say a lot of CSR prizes, but not reliable sources enough so that I can share with you. But if I find one day, what we're planning to do is also share resources so that everyone can check how sustainable their bank is. So please do feel free to check the MyMoneyMyPlanet website, and we'll share the news on that.
Awesome. Looking forward to that, Diane. All right. We've gotten a few questions around what people can personally invest in. So one of the questions, maybe Steve Wourgiotis, you can start. What's the best place to look for green investments? Is there a good website, directory, resource, or recommended search terms? Maybe we could also just broaden that to general sustainable investments.
Sure. So I'll give a start, but the other panelists may want to weigh in here as well. It's surprisingly hard to get specific advice about what you can go and do. As an example, because I knew that I would be asked a question like this, and I'm usually not very good at the practical pieces. I'm like writing papers talking about how money is allocated globally, as opposed to what do I go and do. And so I went into the various places where I've got, like my own retirement from all the 401ks, et cetera. And they're very inequitable, like which ones actually give you an ability to search for terms like that. So I think that you're probably best off first being pragmatic about where is your money actually going to come from. If it's not already part of a corporate plan, or frankly, if you don't have a fair amount to put down into something, you're probably not going to have access to all the different options that are out there. For the money that you do want to put out there, you can very easily get, and I'll drop a couple of links into the chat, just places to start. But honestly, if you just type in, how do I invest in sustainable investment options, you're going to start to find some things. Now, some of those are going to be more like research papers, but there are people who will let you get involved. Now, that's one level of investing. Now, Eric, the way that he was talking about investing, right, poo-pooing those Larry Fink asset managers and all their trillions of dollars that they can allocate. He's talking about doing real projects.
Just poo-pooing Larry Fink. No other asset managers, just Larry Fink.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
I want to be clear.
He'll feel better knowing that.
Much.
And but if you get out there and say, well, what can I do directly? There might be small organizations in your area where people are pooling together money. You can even do something as simple as invest in a solar panel. That's actually not a terrible investment option. And in fact, out there in the world of renewable financing, a great deal of the money flowing through is coming from individual homeowners or small neighborhood communities who are building their own microgrids, for example. And that's a way to do some direct investment. But the reality is you're going to be limited in what you can do from a sustainable investment option by the organizations who are holding your assets. And so what do? You do the Diane thing. You agitate. You get out there and you say, okay, I want more sustainable options for my 401k, or come on, Wells Fargo, I want more options. So that's some initial reactions there. I'm not sure if the other panelists want to add anything.
The only thing that I would add to that is, yeah, it's a bit, well, the retirement, the 401k thing is particularly thorny right now because of the fiduciary rule and what that and what it means to be a fiduciary, and what that in terms of what that definition is. And there are some that are arguing quite assiduously that ESG is not necessarily aligned with fiduciary responsibility. And so that makes it a little bit more difficult. And that's why the options in 401ks have been so limited to date around sustainable investing. Firms don't want to really take on that liability for making claims and then not, basically abiding by their fiduciary duty. So and by the way, the 401k thing is like the holy grail of sustainable investing. Like that is really where, where things can really take off exponentially with the sector. So there's that aspect of it. Just makes, there are just hurdles that have been put in place. And by the way, I'm not getting political, but the current administration has also put up additional hurdles. There's additional discussion around ESG and how it can be considered, and if it's material, if it's a fiduciary responsibility, et cetera, et cetera. I think the other thing I would emphasize, or just in your personal investments, don't give up your agency. One of the things that we want, and I speak of that from an asset management perspective, we want your money. If we don't have your money, we can't charge you fees to manage that money. And so until you put your money across the table and give it to us, you have agency. And don't give up on that agency. Ask your broker or whoever it is, who's ever sort of helping you with your investment, with your investments. What's the sustainable opportunity set? And hold those people accountable, right? And like, this is what I want to see. And if you can't show it to me, I'm going to go to Tom, down the street, across the street, who can show that to me. And if Tom can't show it to me, I'm going to go to Mike. And if Mike can't show it to me, I'm going to go to Steven, et cetera, right? This is your money. And you should invest it the way that you want to, and don't think that because you may not know a lot about investing that you're overwhelmed and there's all this asymmetric information around it, and this person's an expert at managing money. No, they're not experts managing money. Trust me, they're not experts managing money. If you want to do this type of investing, then ask for it and demand it.
And I just want to add one very quick thing to what Eric just said. Hopefully, sometime in the near future, money managers are not all named Eric, Tom, and Steve.
Yes. But
represent a more diverse and gender mixed population.
Yes, my mistake. Very much. Yep. Yes, totally agree.
No, but it's true.
Unfortunately, it is. Yep.
I want to add one little piece to this question as well. I think I saw someone mention it in the chat, but it's such a personal question about where to start. So it really depends on your personal goals, and also taking stock of what you personally invest in, where you save, and what you buy, because your investments are not just the typical personal investment account or retirement account. It's also your savings in your bank, your checking in your bank, and where you spend your dollars every day. So I think that the first thing is start with your goals for your life, for your financial goals. What are your financial goals and what you need? What are your ESG goals? What kind of impact do you want to have? then take stock of where you're at currently with all of those goals. And then, like Stephen said in the beginning, just do a lot of research, because we could list a bunch of different resources, but not all of them are right for everyone. And if you're at a loss for resources, then just keep going, because there are so many.
Awesome, thank you for that. Emma, we actually have a question that maybe you could start us out with. We have two related questions around how does social justice and anti-racism fit into sustainable finance? And then another question, there's conversation around impact investing, recreating the systems of inequality that exist today. How are we helping to move towards a more equitable system?
Yeah, sure. It's really tricky. I actually put the question in about how social justice fits into sustainable finance, because I kind of wanted to hear what other people say. But I the main ways that that it fits in now are around housing. Equal opportunity housing opportunities. Those investments are often aligned to social justice metrics for impact investments. Where I also see it fitting in is around workplace responsibility and diversity. And something that's really on my mind lately is around corporate leadership and board representation, and that companies are ready to disclose their policies around diversity, but there's not a lot of disclosure around targets, how you are striving for those. My work at CDP, every public company has a carbon reduction target and a plan on how they're going to get there, but companies don't have a leadership or board or workforce diversity target and a plan on how they're getting there and disclosing on their progress to that every year. So that's one area that I'd like to see. Another area is around lobbying, and what kinds of activities corporations are lobbying for, disclosure around what companies are really doing. There was an awesome blog, many of you probably are familiar with Just Capital, but they released a blog interviewing a Black Lives Matter leader who said, if companies really want to say that they are with us, but this was a reaction right after many companies were just posting like a Black Lives Matter poster on their Facebook and leaving it at that. Really looking at are they lobbying for ending police brutality? Are they involved with private prisons? Unlocking some of those things are a really interesting space that I think this ESG world needs to move towards.
Thanks,
I'd be
Emma.
happy to add a quick comment, Monica. So this last spring, I wrote a paper looking at where money was going into renewable energy versus into the status quo fossil fuel industry. And I found some terrifying numbers. Overall, when I calculated the direct investment flow, the direct subsidies, so debt and equity capital going in, direct subsidies by governments, as well as indirect subsidies by letting people get away with unpriced damage like pollution. Something like 94% of all of that capital support goes to support the fossil fuel industry. It's shocking. But what gets worse is when you start to look at where in the world is getting the money. And so to the point around social justice and inequity in the systems, if you look at places that are less developed like Africa, Southeast Asia, parts of South America, these places don't have the same sort of market maturity with all the different financial sector players. It's viewed as risky. And so they're facing far greater hurdles in order to attract capital. There's corruption, just all kinds of problems. And so they simply get access to a really tiny portion. And typically that tiny portion of capital that they can do they're going to have to stretch and do not great things in order to achieve the return demanded of that money given to them. So it's a self-reinforcing negative cycle that also then reinforces pre-existing biases in Western European and North American investor mindsets that prevent us from being able to look at those as equally good opportunities. So it ends up starving those areas and preventing their financial sectors from developing to the same kind of maturity. So it's just an example of this entrenched incumbency where the financial sector rewards those who have gotten the money the whole time. What can we do about it? Oh my gosh, I don't really know. We have to be agitators. Policy is going to be the lever there. Think about organizations like NGOs who span multiple countries are going to need to step in and give some guarantee and certainty and partnership to organizations who can bring capital and help develop more robust markets for it.
I just wanted to highlight a point, which is based on the history of ESG, and the history of ESG comes from the Sullivan Principles. I don't know if you're aware of that, but Leon Sullivan was the first African American to join any major US board in 1971, and he created the Sullivan Principles. And basically, he was an activist within, and he was fighting against apartheid in South Africa. And basically, he encouraged so many companies to divest from the companies who were actually supporting apartheid, that it was one of the leverages. Well, no one will ever say if it actually encouraged apartheid to end. But it just shows that with your money, you can have such a huge leverage. And that was already true 50 years ago. And I think today it needs to be true for everyone, not only for someone who's very high and has a lot of power, but for each and every one of us, because I think we really do need it in the world of today.
I guess the only thing that I would add, there are two paths from my perspective. There's sort of the what we can directly invest in to change that incorporates social justice, that incorporates environmental justice, and that's kind of what I was talking about earlier, just in terms of our investment in our activism around ending basically decarcerating juvenile justice in New Jersey. That's not what I want to do. That's not really what I want to spend my time doing. I would much prefer investing in early childhood education and workforce development and, building up capacity in communities. Because, we don't think we don't think that any young person should be locked up. Restorative and transformative justice takes place in community where possible, right? So how do we as investors build up that community, build up that ability to, to shower these kids with continuum of care so that they don't recidivate, right? That's the whole point. But I don't want to invest in that. I'd prefer to invest on the front end. There's a reason we have a problem in the United States anyway, there's a reason we have a problem with mass incarceration, is because we have a problem on the front end with education, healthcare access, workforce development, economic opportunity, right? So is there any surprise here? I don't really think there's all that much of a surprise. But anyway, I digress. So it's one, the direct investments that we can make, and then two, and this is in terms of social justice, and we could talk about D&I, diversity and inclusion at the corporate level. I personally am, obviously I'm probably in a very different point in my career than the vast majority of you here. I've also reached that point where I don't really give a shit anymore, so it doesn't really matter. If you want to change this, you want to change this, diversity and inclusion, and you want to, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. You go to your CEO, hey, let's go to Larry Fink. Let's bring back Larry Fink. Let's go to Larry Fink and say, hey, buddy, if 1 out of 3 hires in 2020 or 2021 now, because of pandemic, because 2021 are not people of color, you don't get a bonus. I guarantee you some shit's gonna happen. Right? And so, but then let's not stop there, because a lot of firms will be able to recruit people of color. into their organization. Now, and what boggles my mind is, like, I have conversations with people, generally speaking, white men who are high up in the organization, and they're kind of like, well, how do we keep these people? How do we get them into upper management? And it's like, well, how did you get into upper management? You're a jackass and you got into upper management. How did that happen? It's like, well, obviously you could ask other people around you if you had a question. You had mentors. You had people who were willing to sponsor you and mentor you. Well, that's exactly what communities of color need. They need mentorship and sponsorship from the very bottom of the organization through the entire ladder of that organization. And so it just doesn't stop at recruiting, but it also has a lot to do with the culture and how you sponsor and mentor people. And I think that's what's missing. I think that's where where a lot of decisions are made in corporate America without a lens from colleagues of color, because they haven't been brought along to the same, they haven't been helped, they haven't been aided like their white colleagues.
Thank you for that. That's amazing. Yes, preach. Reading the Zoom chat. Yeah, I think we're all in agreement here on that. I wanted to open things up to everyone here in the room, in case we didn't get to your question on Slido. If you want to unmute yourselves or raise your hand, whatever, and you can ask your question if you have one. I wanted to just give everyone the opportunity to do that. Any brave souls?
Yeah, absolutely. We don't have the option to raise your hand on Zoom, so please raise your hand visually, and I'll unmute you if you don't have the option to unmute. Thank you for sticking with us. The discussion has been so good, we're not going to be able to do the breakout rooms. But please, anybody would like to say a few things and have some more group participation?
No, I'm happy to ask another question from our Slido. All right, we'll do that. Feel free to jump in if somebody else has another question. We have a question starting with Eric. How do you measure the impact for your investments? Mostly by quantitative data or qualitative? And do you use questionnaires or other tools?
So yeah, I mean, that's like the $64,000 question if we were living in 1960. So as an impact investor, we have metrics, we have an idiosyncratic inquiry for each investment that we make, right? So in order for us to make an investment, we have to be able to engage directly with the entity that we're investing in, right? And so we have an idiosyncratic inquiry that includes the metrics that in many cases are quantitative, but in other instances are qualitative. So it's a mix and a match of metrics. And so, and again, it's different for each sector that we're involved in. So when we're in the education space, clearly from a quantitative perspective, we're going to look at attendance rates and graduation rates and proficiency in English language arts and math. I realize there's controversy around one exam, and I'm not suggesting by any stretch of the imagination that we're using only one exam to make quantitative conclusions. But those are certainly, how many kids go on, if you have a 12th grade, how many kids go on a 2-year, 4-year continuing technical education, et cetera, retention rates. One of the really interesting statistics that we look at is, what percentage of the teachers or the faculty are people of color. Because we know outcomes and achievements are significantly higher for students of color when they can look in front of a class and see someone that looks like them, right? So, and then there's other things that are more qualitative in nature. What are the specific programs and initiatives that are there to keep kids attached and don't drop out? What are the things that you're doing from a restorative justice perspective? What are the things that you're doing that sort of interfere with the school to prison pipeline, right? So those are the type of things that we're looking at from an education perspective, from a healthcare perspective. There, numerous, reacquired healthcare acquired infections, readmission rates, patient satisfaction. Those are all very quantitative oriented. And then, the more qualitative is, okay, so what investments are you specifically making in social determinants of health? That basically are going to make your community healthier. So it's a mix and a match, to be honest with you. So yeah, that's what I'll say.
Hi, Eric. May I ask two follow-up questions? That question was mine. Thanks for answering. So what I would be really interested in is where do you get the indicators from? Did you develop them yourselves, or do you use some kind of framework? And also, how much do they depend from case to case? So let's say depending on, I think you mentioned you invest in municipalities, right, and not in companies. But whatever it is, like, do they depend case on case, or?
So I mean, there's not a whole heck of a lot of quantifiable data around ESG in the municipal space. So it's a blessing and a curse. The blessing is hopefully you do it rigorously enough and thoroughly enough, and so there's some authenticity to it, and people can sniff that out, and so you can basically define the space. And I think the curse is if you want to replicate this, this type of investment, you kind of have to have some sort of standardization, right? So it's a push and a pull. That being said, we've spent a lot of time reading, interviewing, consulting with people in the various spaces that we invest in to come up with these metrics. Nothing's in stone. It's not. There's nothing's in concrete. It's an organic process. And if someone were if you were to come to me and ask me a question about a specific sector and said, have you looked at this metric? And I hadn't, like, well, shit, I hope you don't mind. I'm going to steal that and see if I can make it, see if I can make it work. Right. So we're open to all of that stuff, but there's been a tremendous amount of research and effort that's gone into the questions that we ask and the metrics that we're looking to keep track of.
Mm-hmm. And do you get all this information from basically just by asking the question basically just by asking your investees, or is there any information that you can get otherwise, or that maybe you should also get otherwise to be sure that it's accurate?
So you're suggesting that they would lie to us? Oh my God, I can't believe they would lie to us. No, I mean, clearly quality control of data is really, really important. And so, with with education, the state departments of education have pretty decent repositories of data that confirm, or, you can basically, cross-reference with the data that the district gives you, or what have you. There are third-party repositories from a healthcare perspective, like the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services. They have a rating system, and they break that down into numerous metrics that you can follow and that you can understand over time. And so there are different ways of skinning the cat outside of just asking them and relying on them for their honesty. I mean, I will be honest with you. If you ask a if you ask a potential investee a question and they lie, and you find that out, like, I don't even know, luckily I don't think that's happened yet, but if they were to do that, like, wow, that's bad. That's really bad. Maybe
you just haven't found out yet.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, shame on me for not finding that out. Yeah, but hopefully that's not the case. So.
All right, thanks a lot. Or actually one last question. I don't want to block everyone here, but one last follow-up. Would you say it's the same for companies? If you invest in companies, would you say it's the same, like the process of gathering the data and indicators?
I think Stephen would be able to answer that better than I would. But I mean, what's really special? So there are organizations out there like Sustainalytics and MSCI who have done a very thorough job getting better at it, but to date a thorough job in collecting this data. and being repositories for which other analysts can, basically look at the record around the environment, social, and governance criteria that they follow. So that there are much more easily accessible and central repositories for that data on the corporate side of things. And by the way, I'm on the municipal side of things, and so I'm assuming that's going to change over time. I mean, clearly there's money to be made in collecting this data, and I have conversations often enough with people at Bloomberg and people with at other data management companies that are looking to move into this venue. So I do think it's a matter of time, but corporations definitely have. There's a lot of material out there around the environmental, social, and governance bona fides of corporations, public corporations.
And I know that we're
thanks a lot.
over time, but just to land what Eric was saying there, definitely Sustainalytics is an organization that's done a lot of work, and Morningstar has written some great papers summarizing what to look at, what to pay attention to. And they have actually now included Sustainalytics ESG reporting structure in their risk ratings. So they've taken it so seriously, and that's going to give a real boost to establishing that as a common platform. And in the chat, Sherry S. just pointed out that there are some other organizations like SASB, Sustainable Accounting Standards Board, and then TCFD, which is Mike Bloomberg's task force. There's real movement in this area. Those are great places to start.
I have one other thing to add on the corporate side of disclosures, that you do have to take it with a grain of salt that you are going off of reported information from the company. And, it's not always audited information. Sometimes like greenhouse gases are verified by a third party, but, the SEC isn't requiring this disclosure. So it's voluntary disclosures. And yeah, you can make your opinion if you think corporate America is telling the truth when they're making their disclosures. But there's also kind of an emerging AI presence in the ESG space to try to verify information by like collating media reports and investigative reports on company behavior, such as Datamaran. You can look in Datamaran, and there's a few other interesting ones. So hopefully that can help to make the space more reliable.
Amazing. Well, we're a little over time. Thank you to everyone for sticking with us. We just wanted to quickly put up an audience poll. Wanted to get your feedback on everything before everyone signs off. Stephen, if you could put that up for us, that would be great. Take a second, fill that out. Yeah, and just wanted to say thank you again to all of our speakers. Such amazing conversation today, and I know for me personally, I learned something new from this. I hope everyone can walk away and say the same for themselves. Such a great community. So just thank you all so much. Amazing. Thank you for filling out the polls too. Awesome. All right. Well, with that, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you again to our speakers. Seriously, we really appreciate you sharing your information with us and your knowledge. Yeah, look forward to continuing the conversation offline.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining.